Jesse, let's pivot here to some of the more impactful portal moves. And you could probably put DJU into that category. When it comes to guys that are going to be, the more impactful names, or maybe the most, we'll look back and say this guy really changed maybe the complexion of the college football season because they got him on their roster. I'm looking at Dillon Gabriel at Oregon. And if they don't land Dillon Gabriel, I suppose you could say they still land Dante Moore. But like Dillon Gabriel, I think, makes Oregon a more serious national title contender, which I don't think is really a stretch. What are your thoughts on how he fits in at Oregon and maybe how serious you take Oregon with him now on the roster as opposed to without him?
I mean, that's a hand-glove fit in Will Stein's offense. This is a guy that I think, if people aren't that familiar with Oregon's offensive coordinator, came from UTSA where he was running, this crazy RPO, quick game, get it out, spit it out, and let your playmakers do the stuff with a lefty and Frank Harris. And now he's got this little, Hawaiian southpaw and Dillon Gabriel, who just led the Big 12 in passing, yards, touchdowns, everything, completion percentage. So I think, what we saw Bo Nix do in this offense a year ago, we may see even bigger numbers. Maybe not quite as much running. I don't think Dillon is quite the athlete of Nix, but he will take off a time or two a game. We saw that against Texas, last year. But I think, absolutely, Oregon hit a home run there. Dillon Gabriel doesn't have like the NFL upside of a lot of guys in college football, but he is the quintessential college football quarterback. He's the type of guy that you want on in your program for 4 or 5 years because he's going to put up monster stats. He's going to win a ton of games. And so he is one of many marquee additions that Oregon made out of the transfer portal. You get the defensive tackles from Michigan State, Evan Stewart, who he's going to be throwing to, former 5-star from Texas A&M. Love that move. But I'm super high on Dillon Gabriel.
I mean, I think even just the fact that, like we talked about with Will Howard, the experience level that he has, where he's not going to walk into a game against Ohio State and have the shaky hands like we see that clip rolling around on Twitter. It feels like whenever someone's a little bit shook. I love that for him. I love that for Oregon. Who else do you think is maybe one of the more impactful or pivotal transfer moves that happened, whether it be in the winter cycle or the spring cycle?
Yeah, I'm going to go with Nick Scorton, the pass rusher who from Purdue, now at Texas A&M. He's a guy that he very quietly led the Big Ten in sacks last year, playing opposite of nobody, and that's pretty dang hard to do, JD, when you're playing on a team as terrible as Purdue, because it's not as if teams are having to pass a whole lot against you because your team is trailing most of the game. So impressive that he had just the sheer volume of hurries and quarterback hits he was able to accumulate. Now he goes to a Texas A&M team. Yes, they lose Walter Nolan and some other pieces, LT Overton and some other guys up front there, but they still have Shamar Turner. They still have Shamar Stewart. I mean, I think that defensive line by the end of the season could be the best in the SEC. And if that's the case, and if Scorton lives up to his first-round potential, then the Aggies could be another one of these teams where I don't think they're going to be in the playoff conversation, but they could be, they could pick off a team or two. Oh, what if they beat Texas at the end of the year, in that huge rivalry game on Thanksgiving weekend? How could that shake up the dynamics of the playoff? Scorton has that game-changing ability. So I kind of think that he doesn't have the name cachet of the Walter Nolans and the Dillon Gabriels and some of these other guys that have kind of been around. But I think he's a guy that fans need to know.
I was going to say that's one of those deep cuts from the portal that he doesn't have the 5-star quarterback juice, but he's one of those guys that where if A&M wants to take that next step under Mike Elko, having a disruptor, game changer, game takeover kind of guy like a Nick Scorton feels like one of those pivotal pieces. Wouldn't it be the most college football thing ever, Jesse, if we get to that last game of the season? Let's say that Texas walks into Kyle Field at 9-2, A&M sitting there at I don't know, let's call them 7-4, and A&M is the team to hand Texas their third loss, bump them out of the college football playoff. 9-3, I think, is probably the cutoff in my mind at least. I mean, that would just be the most college football, most realignment, most Texas A&M rivalry kind of thing ever, would it not?
That's your Texas Pete hot sauce right there. I mean, that would be spicy. I'd like it.
Extra juice. Well, I'll go the other side of that rivalry. I am buying all the Isaiah Bond stock I can get right now, Jesse. I think he is going to be 1,000+ yard wide receiver, and I'm just like, okay, I think was good at Alabama. I don't know that Jalen Milroe or that offensive scheme period had found their footing enough to really maximize him. Still averaged 14 yards a catch, and you put that speed, that ability, that explosivity in Steve Sarkisian's offense. I'm like, okay, it's going to be, as long as Quinn Ewers doesn't lose his head, they're going to be in really good shape, and I think he's going to make up for a ton of that production lost by Adonai Mitchell and by Xavier Worthy.
This may be showing my own age, but it's showing my where I was born in the South. But there's a famous Andy Griffith scene, which was way back in the 50s, where he's sitting there with Goober, the mechanic, and he's like, speed, speed, speed. That's all they ever want to talk about. And that is all you want to talk about with Isaiah Bond, because the dude is just electric. And I'm right there with you. I think, he's going to be a match made in heaven for that Steve Sarkisian offense, especially because he's going to be, playing opposite of, Silas Bolden they bring in out of the portal from Oregon State, who's really good. They bring in Houston's best wide receiver. Oh, they have a 5-star, who just got his feet wet a year ago. So that Texas's receiver room is stacked, and it kind of starts with Isaiah Bond.
Dude, Andy Griffith, one of the best. I think it's probably – maybe it's up for debate against The Office in terms of theme song, but intro theme song, the Andy Griffith Show with the whistle, that, I think that's creme de la creme. That's just my opinion. That's another show for another time, but that's my opinion.
And that JD's saying that he's a California boy.
Hit me with it. That's what I'm saying, man. That's what I mean. I feel like I've got a pretty even take on this whole thing, and didn't grow up watching the Andy Griffith Show per se, but I know that theme song and I know that show, and I'm just telling you that. To me, that's on the Mount Rushmore. Any other portal guys that you think are kind of pivotal pieces to this whole 2024 season before we move on here, Jesse?
Yeah, let's go to a team that's kind of a team without a home, but that's kind of what they've chosen, the chosen path, and that's Riley Leonard, quarterback at Notre Dame. He's a guy who missed all of spring. This is one that I think, again, similar to DJU, I think this just kind of there's a lot of different avenues and ways that the Riley Leonard story could play out in 2024. Is he healthy? Is that if that ankle and everything is up to snuff, could he look like what he did 2 years ago when he led Duke to one of their best seasons in school history? If he does that, then Notre Dame, what sort of upside do they have as a program? I didn't realize this, JD, but when I did my unit rankings late spring, Notre Dame, their beat writer for our Irish site at On 3 pointed out that they were the only team other than Georgia that made the top 10 of every single one of my top 10 unit rankings. So this is a roster that's pretty stacked. I mean, from Howard Cross and Benjamin Morrison and Xavier Watts on defense. And then I like what they've done in the receiver room via the portal with Bo Collins and the Mitchell kid from FAU. But it's going to center around the quarterback. And that's been kind of Notre Dame's, that's what's kind of capped them in recent years. And so can Riley Leonard elevate the program and kind of take them to the heights that they believe they should be at? Or is he just not quite the guy and isn't healthy and Notre Dame loses 2 or 3 games and, they're kind of saying, hey, we kind of squandered a cake schedule in a loaded season.
Again, multiple times a week, Jesse Simonton dropping bangers. If you missed the unit rankings, still time to catch up before we get into the season. But I'm with you, man. That to me is one of the most fascinating situations in college football because I'll be honest, I am a little bit probably more wait and see on Riley Leonard in terms of what he's going to do pushing the ball downfield. But if he unlocks that vertical pass game for Notre Dame, like you just mentioned what they got via the portal with Jaden Harrison, Chris Mitchell, Bo Collins, Jeremiah Love as well out of the backfield as a weapon for them. Mike
Jeremiah
Denbrock
Love, yeah.
coming – say it again?
I said Jeremiah Love, yeah. I mean, he's a really good running back. And you're just about – I didn't mean to interrupt you.
You're great.
Teasing a Denbrock. If he does even a little bit with Riley of what he did with Jaden Daniels, look out.
I'm just saying, I know we're kind of getting into like the ifs and what ifs and potentialities, which I know probably most Notre Dame fans are like, hey, just let us play that first game and see how we look. But like the pieces are there and they're lining up to where if they hit with Riley Leonard the way that they could with that Mike Denbrock offense, could get scary. Could get very, very scary. And also the schedule to walk it further down the road there, very doable. Super. I mean, they could be in that 5 spot with 1 loss and be chilling. So
I think that Texas A&M game is going to be key for them because the rest of their schedule is kind of cake. If they don't, and it's not to say it's, one doesn't just walk into College Station and win a game. So they're going to have to show up and play well, even with the questions around the Aggies in 24. But because the rest of that schedule, you have Army, Navy, Army and Navy, which they don't typically play both in the same season. They play a FCS team for the first time ever. If they don't win in week 1, they pretty much need to go 10-1 the rest of the season, or else they're not getting in. You lose. I think if they lose then to USC and Florida State, 9-3 Notre Dame's probably not making it.
Yeah,
not with this schedule.
Yeah, I mean, sorry, I didn't cut you off there either. I'm curious even if like does 10-2 without a conference title game leave you on the outside looking in? It definitely doesn't put you in that 5 spot. So they're going to be fascinating, man. A lot of firepower out there in South Bend, which I don't know we've been saying for the better part of the last 5 or so years when it comes to Notre Dame. Hey, y'all, thanks so much for watching. Subscribe to the channel here to make sure you don't miss an episode of The Hard Count. Also, be sure to check out other videos on the On3 YouTube channel.